episode of A View from the Top. And we're sitting again at Signature Flight Support at Luton Airport in this luxurious lounge. The first episode of the series, we looked into buying a private jet. And today, we looked into the next step, aircraft management. Basically what you do with the aircraft after you buy it. We have two experts from the industry, Oliver Stone from Colibri Aircraft. Welcome, Oliver.
Thank you.
And Alex Durand from Saxon Air, an aircraft management and charter operator. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks.
So, Alex, may I start from you? Tell us a bit about your background and how you got in the industry.
Yeah, so my background and how I got into the industry was completely by accident. I did an English degree. I put off work as long as I could, and then at the end of my degree, I read a book about a Vietnam helicopter pilot, and I decided that sounds cool, I'll become a helicopter pilot. Found out that I had no qualifications or relevant experience and couldn't, so instead I got a job working operations desk at Oxford Airport to get subsidised flying. I worked up to my PPL over 2 years, and then to do my hours building I worked for the local air taxi company and just gradually grew into it, got more interested in the management, abandoned any aspirations to be a pilot.
Today you run Saxon Air, based on Norwich Airport. And what is your main business?
So we're known primarily for operating jets and helicopters, and that is something we're very visible with. I've been there 10 years, but the group, family-owned business, we also look after offshore helicopter operations. We run a handling agent, and we also own the property and hangars we're in. So there's 5 different businesses going on.
And you, Oliver, you're an aircraft broker.
Correct.
But you do advisory services.
Correct.
And that's why I decided to invite you today. Tell us your views about aircraft management. So how did you get into the business?
Like all of us, I got bitten by an aviation bug far too early and decided that being a pilot would be tons of fun. And then I was in university one day watching a TV show, and it was about a long-haul Northwest Airlines cargo pilot. And they said it was the life of a pilot on a 35-year career. You're gone from home for about 17 years. I thought, that doesn't actually turn me on that much. So I looked for things in the business aspect of aviation, and I knew a guy who invited me to come at a aircraft brokerage company, and 20 years later, here I am. So.
And today you run Colibri Aircraft?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And what's your main business?
So Colibri Aircraft's got 2 main business streams. The biggest one by far is helping people buy and sell airplanes, and we are in an advice and a service business. We're not in the trading business. We provide expertise for people in how to navigate the transactional process because they're extraordinarily complicated. And then we've solved a lot of problems over the years in getting transactions completed for clients, and so we figured out there was a smaller niche business for us of helping clients with problems resolve those problems.
So you don't do aircraft management, but you advise people to deal with aircraft management.
That's correct, frequently. So people will come to us and say, I want to buy a plane, what do I do? And so we walk them through the process, and a big part of it we tell them is it's all well and good to buy the plane, but you're actually buying it to use it, so let's figure out how you're going to use it before we get too far into buying it. And as part of that, we get very quickly into management, because the aircraft management and client relationship is probably the most vital relationship there will be for the ownership period.
Because a long-term relationship,
Yes.
like that one-off transaction.
So to put this in perspective, we help a client out, it's a period of 6 to 12 months while we buy an airplane for them, and that varies upon the project. But then they're going to own that airplane for 3 to 10 years. And they're going to be with that manager every day, every week for that 3 to 10 year period. So we try to get that process in place as rapidly as possible. It also helps the purchase process to have the management company there so they can prepare it for their operation. And it also just helps to build a rapport between the client and the manager, who they're going to be together for the next number of years. And it's a very frequent relationship. I mean, the 2 of you will know this very well. You're probably talking to your clients minimum once a month. For some people, probably a few times a month. And so it's a very ongoing relationship that you need to set early on. So.
Well, it's complicated. It's been married, I guess. Your point, Alex, you manage aircraft. What is the most challenging part of this element of your business?
There are so many challenges, and I think it's actually the complexity. I think there are 2 main aspects which I'm increasingly aware of. Is there are so many things to remember, and that's where I think experience comes into it. The regulations change, the financial rules change. There are so many aspects. You're running a small business, but you're running an airline at the same time in terms of an approval structure. The operator is the pinch point. They are explaining the ownership cycle to the owner, their representatives, they're then managing the team. We are the messenger that gets shot a lot of the time. We are telling them the bad news on the maintenance. We're telling them the good news on where they can go. So we're always in the middle of it, which means it's always exciting, it's always interesting.
I would say probably 99% of aircraft owners these days will choose a management company to manage their asset. And as you said, it's a big asset, and effectively operators like ourselves, management companies, we're asset managers. So from your point, Oliver, when you advise a client, how do you point them towards the right direction to pick up the right operator?
So to help point them in the right direction of an operator, when we start at the higher levels, and say, what is it that you're really targeting with your relationship? Are you trying to find a charter company that also manages airplanes, or are you looking for a management company that also charters airplanes?
That's a good point.
There's a very big difference between those 2 points, and their approach to how that asset is used will be quite different as well. And a lot of times that comes down to a financial perspective for owners, or a perception of they don't want an underutilized asset, whether they need the money or not. And so you just have to understand what is it that they are trying to get out of it. For some people, they want that airplane to be their airplane, only their airplane with very, very small exceptions, but it's their private jet. Other people, it is just a way that they can own an airplane that they like, but candidly they just want it working whenever they're not using it, and that's just a different subjective opinion. So it's to understand that to begin with. And once we know that, there's very good companies on both sides of that spectrum. We try and introduce that relationship to those people so they can start to work through, is this a right fit for me? Because fundamentally business is people, and you need to know that you're going to have a good relationship with that person who's going to be running that management company for you in the way that you want. So,
as we said, it's like a marriage, so you need to find the right person to hope that you're going to get on with for the rest of that long relationship.
And what we tell people is it's an extremely personal thing. And actually the large majority of companies in this business are small businesses. By and large, and even the very, very large ones are usually segmented down into fairly personal, smaller size enterprises where you will spend a lot of time dealing with the managing director of that business, as you guys will well know. And so it is an extremely personal thing. And you are going to be in direct contact with the owner, you'll be in direct contact with the MD of the operating company. If you hate each other, it's not going to work. So you've got to get along well, and you've got to have a lot of faith in what they're saying is accurate and true.
And Alex, how difficult it is to deal with these people?
Oh, they're a pleasure. I mean, in terms of how difficult the relationships are, you're dealing with some of the most successful people there are, and there are either teams of people, you're going through them as well. They're not all the same, but as you know, George, they are relentless, and especially when they've invested in an asset which is to make them move faster, to get more deals done, to enjoy their time off more. When you are responsible for that being a success, you are having very direct conversations with people you wouldn't ordinarily ever speak to about things that matter, about their personal schedules, their business schedules, the things that have gone well for them, usually the things that you've messed up because their plane was late. So, yeah, it can be very challenging.
And managing expectations from day one is really important, isn't it?
100%.
It is, and that's everything, but it's a balance about retaining their excitement and the reasons that they're investing their time and a substantial amount of money into it, whilst letting them know what the ownership cycle. It's not a one-week relationship. You're going to be talking in 3 years, so what you tell them now, you need to remember you're going to have to be explaining down the line.
Operator getting involved at that early stage is really important, because then it's easier to explain the challenges and hopefully manage those expectations going forward.
It just doesn't happen enough, and I think the relationships that have gone well are the ones where we've been involved very early on.
A lot of clients come to us and say, man, I saw this airplane online, it's the most beautiful thing, I want it. You go, that's great, but why don't we chat with somebody who knows about these things, and we'll see how this is going to work, because a lot of times there's extra requirements on an operating basis on wet runways versus dry runways and how far that can be. And if he lives next door to a very short runway and he can't use it in the rain and you live in England, that's a problem because England rains a lot. Or There might be no European approved training facilities for those pilots, so now you got to send your pilots over to the States to go get trained twice a year.
Very good point.
Those sorts of things add up, and so we try to build what happens after you own it. Because again, people buy airplanes to fly in them, not just to have them sit in the hangar. And it's the nuanced details that make or break a successful ownership experience. Expectations management, as you said, I tell everybody that comes to us, that is the most important thing you can do from day one. Because everyone walks into it thinking, it's going to be great, it's going to be glorious, there's never going to be a bad day, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'll leave in 5 minutes, and that's the way it is. And the practical reality is it's very different than that. And so it's good to just have that walking into that while they know. Because the people that walk in understanding how the operating basis will be are the happiest clients we have. The unhappiest people, without question, are those that approach this and said, this is going to be the greatest thing I've ever done, I'll never have a bad day. They're out in 2 years. The people that walk into it aware of what's happening, they're into it for the rest of their days.
So, with aircraft management, have we got different levels? Do we have the full management, the semi-management, or the partial?
So you can tailor a program of management for a client that may not be the full thing. So to your point, you can say, hey, we will do this to the point of, we'll send you a bill once a month, write us a check, and just tell us when you want to go flying, and we'll handle all the rest. It can the middle range, which is you want to do some of your own charter sales or whatever it may be, and you can work around that. And then you have the bare bones of, we're going to provide you the manuals, and you can go off and operate it privately, but we're going to help with some of the background work. So there's definitely different structures in there for how that works. But this is a very bespoke thing, client by client. And so everyone's going to have their own requests.
Another pros and cons about going to a large company or a smaller one from the client's point.
We, I suppose, position ourselves as a boutique. It's small enough to be personal, but large enough to have an efficiency, a scale, and a robustness. Whereas if you go to your organisation, it's got a breadth, it's got a solidity, it's got a range of offerings that pretty much everything is available. And I think that's down to, do you want that personal side? Do you want to ring the managing director of the smaller company and have that understanding it's my aircraft and I know you're looking after it? Or is it ideal with blue ribboned type organisations? I want to know that this is, I don't want to know any names because they're so big. They've got loads of people that can sort my stuff out.
Absolutely. And we spoke, Oliver, you spoke before about management purely for the owner's use or management and charter. How does that work?
There's several different types about this. You kind of have a very private operation where somebody says, this is really just going to be my plane. You know, it will be for charter very minimally, however much is the legal requirement to be, but fundamentally it's their plane. And that is a very different perspective for it. You know, it's a much more of a service business as a management company. You are not going to make revenue on charter, so the management company is looking at this purely from a monthly fee basis of what it will take for their management of that asset. And it's a very, that airplane is available solely for the owner's use. Whereas on the charter side of things, a lot of times the management companies make a revenue out of the charters that they sell, and sometimes that can help with a smaller monthly management bill, and sometimes not, just depends upon the operator. But it just depends what that client finds to be important for them.
As an aircraft owner, should I expect any charter income I get? Should I decide to charter my aircraft to offset all my costs?
No. So that is back to expectations management. And we tell clients, and we had this conversation all the time. People call up and say, it's beautiful, I love the plane, I want to buy it and charter it and make money. We say, well, that will never happen, ever. And we tell clients all the time, or potential clients all the time, if it was possible for management companies to buy airplanes and charter and make money, they would have thousands of airplanes. They don't. So, you know, and if someone's telling you can, ask them, if it's that profitable, why don't you go to the bank, get a loan, buy the plane, and go do that? So, because, you know, if it was that good, they should be able to. So
Sure.
We tell clients all the time, you will never make money chartering it. The best you can hope for is to help pay some of your bills. But it will always, an airplane is 100% a cost center. It will always be a cost center. You just have to make sure that you value what you get out of it in relation to that cost.
From your experience, Alex, what percentage of your operating cost someone can expect to offset?
Depends on their own use, and I think a very typical model is about 25% owner use, 75% charter, and within the actual spare capacity there is that. That's usually manageable. on that, I think if you got over 50% of your costs covered in very broad terms, it depends how you define your costs. I think that the very best you could ever expect is a break even.
It's an interesting discussion. Thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
Alex from Saxon and Oliver from Colibri Aircraft.
Thank you very much, George.
Thanks so much.